Welcome to the Lay of the Land podcast, where we are exploring what people are building in Cleveland and throughout Northeast Ohio. I am your host, Jeffrey Stern, and today's conversation is a special one. This is the 250th episode of Lay of the Land, and to mark it, I wanted to do something a little different. Most episodes of this podcast are centered on founder stories. What drives someone to do the very difficult thing of trying to build a company to solve whatever problem they feel compelled enough to devote their life to solving, and what they have learned along the way. But for today, I wanted to step back and talk about the thing that underpins and ties these stories together, our community itself. And there is no one I would rather have for that conversation than Chris Heivly. Chris is a serial entrepreneur, early stage investor, startup community builder, and the founder of Build the Fort. He also was a co-founder of MapQuest, is a best-selling author and writer today, and someone whose thinking has had a real influence on the direction of Lay of the Land when I started it back in 2018. Chris actually came to Cleveland back in 2018 and shared his assessment of our community at the City Club. And a lot of what he relayed stayed with me and fueled the origins of this podcast. Over the last 250 episodes, Lay of the Land has grown into something much bigger than I originally imagined. Not simply a repository of entrepreneurial stories, but a kind of connective tissue for entrepreneurship in Cleveland. Dozens of events, thousands of introductions, new friendships, mentorships, hires, investments and funding rounds, and even co-founders, and I'm sure many second and third order consequences that I will never even know about. So for this episode, it felt worth reflecting on that whole journey and explore how entrepreneurial communities actually form, what makes them stronger, what gets in their way, and what has that looked like here in Cleveland. In our conversation, Chris and I talk about what he saw when he first came to Cleveland, why density and storytelling matters so much, why founders have to be at the heart of it, why confidence is contagious, why you have to build upon your credible strengths. We talk about the give first mentality, about mentorship, trust, meaningful relationships, the limits of top-down ecosystem design, and a whole lot more. Chris has spent years studying how startup communities form, evolve, and endure, and I'm grateful to have him here as a thought partner today. I am also grateful to all of you who have listened, who have shared, supported, and helped make 250 episodes possible, and will help make the next 250 possible as well. So thank you. It really does mean a lot to me. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Cerity Partners. As a wealth management firm, Cerity Partners shares Lay of the Land's same dedication to serving local business owners, and the Cerity Partners Cleveland team understands the challenges that entrepreneurs and founders face here in Cleveland, Northeast Ohio, and beyond. Wealth comes with complexity and increased demands on time and resources. It is easy to become overwhelmed. Cerity Partners clients benefit from a unified team of local specialists who coordinate across both business and personal needs. With Cerity Partners' commitment to transparency and putting clients' needs first, complexity can become clarity. To learn more, please visit CerityPartners.com or call 216-464-6266 today. Cerity Partners, proud to be recognized as one of the top financial advisory firms in the country. Well, Chris, first off, I want to thank you for being here.
Well, it's my pleasure. Anytime we can talk about this stuff is a good day by me.
Yeah, it genuinely feels sort of like a full circle moment for me. And if you don't mind, I'll preamble a little bit here because this is a special episode. It is 250 in the making, and thank you. When you came to Cleveland and gave the City Club talk back in 2018, a lot of it resonated with me. You talked about, the importance of culture, how it sits upstream of everything else, and how founders need to know who each other are and support each other and operate in an environment of trust and visibility and generosity, this whole kind of give first mentality, which we'll talk about, but in an environment where that compounds. And you offered to me kind of a roadmap, like an honest, reality-based assessment of Cleveland that to me felt like tough love, but I took it seriously. And At the time, back in 2018, I was building a venture-backed company in Cleveland, trying to find my own footing as an entrepreneur. And I increasingly came to feel that if I was going to build something there, that I wanted to do whatever I could to try and help strengthen the environment that we were all building in, and to make sure that other founders knew who each other were, and to reduce some of the isolation that permeates entrepreneurship, and to make it really this bottoms-up founder-led movement where people actually help each other, and in doing so, increase our collective likelihood of success. And over the last 5 years, that conviction has amounted into lay of the land. Most of the podcast has been dedicated to founder stories, what motivates someone to do the very difficult thing of trying to build a company to solve whatever problem they're passionate enough about solving. But for today, I wanted to take a step back and talk more about the community itself as a concept, because it's really at the heart of why I wanted to do this in the first place.
Right.
And it's been such a core inspiration for so much of the work. And I when I was like thinking back on this whole journey, I can trace it back to this talk that you gave.
That's pretty cool.
And so I'm grateful that you're here, and we can just kind of talk about it.
Yeah.
Not that we've solved all the problems, by the way, but
No, or that we're ever done solving the problems, Jeffrey. So
yeah,
this is a lifetime journey.
It certainly feels like it, but it's a lot of fun. And what's cool now, just being honest with myself about it, is there's a good faith group of a few hundred local founders in Cleveland who I think at least understand directionally, like what we need to do, where we need to go. And a lot of that, I think, is shaped by some of the ideas that you've kind of put into words.
Yeah, thanks. I mean, that makes me excited for Cleveland as an ecosystem. So I can't wait to talk more about that.
Yeah. So I was trying to think where the best place to start actually is. And I guess what sticks out to you when you reflect on when you came to Cleveland? Like, what was salient about your understanding of the city and how it was operating at that time?
Yeah, sure. So for a little context, David Cohen, Brad Feld, and I decided in 2017, late 2016, 2017, to create a business unit inside Techstars to share all of our kind of common ideas about how ecosystems get built.
Yeah.
They in Boulder, me in Raleigh, Durham, and a few other places. And what if we could help other people out? I mean, so it's from that pure give first in a way, right? Like, can we build obviously it was also a business, so there was an exchange of dollars, but other than that, it's like we really want to help entrepreneurs in places that are still kind of figuring out the way to go. That year we did 5 pilots. Now,
Yeah.
what I want to tell you this because I want to put Cleveland in context.
Yeah.
Richmond, Virginia, Fort Wayne, Indiana, Lima, Peru, a place, the region's called the Okanagan, but I just blanked on the name of the town. Shoot, it's up in Canada near Vancouver. Kelowna, Kelowna, one of my favorite places in the world now. So Kelowna, and then Cleveland. So you have these kind of like 2 internationals, one being quasi in Canada, right? You got a place like Lima, Peru. You got little places like Fort Wayne.
Yeah.
And you got a place like Cleveland. And so in that context, what was exciting to go into Cleveland was I knew kind of former Rust Belt kind of place, a place that was still weeping over LeBron going and coming and doing whatever he was, you know what I mean? So, the Browns, I'm a sports guy. So, I kind of know, but I'm also originally from Philadelphia. So I have kind of a Northeast, and Cleveland kind of maybe a little more mid-Atlantic or slightly Midwest, but I knew I was going to kind of find a lot of people that I understood. And I also knew that it was a city that had been challenged for lots of years. We were talking earlier about the whole Rust Belt kind of thing. So I was really excited to go into Cleveland and see what I was going to find.
Yeah. To kind of frame the whole conversation, I think that we'll have, how did you come to build the vernacular to describe what an entrepreneurial ecosystem looks like? What are the kind of raw ingredients? What goes into your diagnostic as you would go into those cities to figure out what was going on?
It's a great question. And I'm glad to share it with you and your audience because you guys were a pilot. And so you're on the early days of some of that. we certainly had our individual experiences and some language about that. Brad had his Startup Communities book, which had come out in 2012, which was a Bible for me. I was a Jeffrey Stern of Raleigh, Durham. So, my partner and I, Dave Neal, who were running an accelerator at the time, we kind of came to that book and really loved a lot of the ideas and thoughts in it. But I thought that the book ended too early. We needed more stuff. And
Yeah.
as a funny aside, when Dave and I shut our accelerator down, and I was looking for something interesting to do, I had a conversation. Went out to Boulder to hang out with David Cohen and Brad, and I sat down with Brad. I'm like, I think you need to write Startup Communities Part 2, and I want to help you do that. Which, by the way, that's the way I heard it in my mind. I think what it probably sounded like, because I think Brad's an amazing guy, was like, Mr. Feld, I was thinking maybe we could, write a book together. And anyway, he laughed, and then we decided to build this business, right? So part of that was all our individual things, but we had a very intentional way of saying, like, all right, we need to do this in a way that isn't about Boulder or Raleigh Durham, right? That's bigger than that. And a couple really smart people, Mark Nager, who kind of, ran, startup weekends and startup weeks and kind of basically put that into our world. Ian Hathaway, who Brad had already started working with to write that book, which is called The Startup Community Way. So a lot of smart people. And we just kept, and I do have to say, after, years of my accelerator preaching lean startup and the business model canvas and all those things,
Yeah.
now I have to fricking use it myself. Right.
Right.
So I can tell you, Jeffrey, I probably did close to 75 interviews in that first year of 2017. Just a lot of it was inbound, which is the amazing part about Techstars, but a lot of it just kind of splintered. And I ran the community discovery or customer discovery playbook to a hilt. So all of that stuff got thrown into the stew, and we started to kind of put some frameworks together, which, by the way, seemed to change about every month. Right. So that's kind of how what we brought, the language, the ideas, the idea of like the 5 themes, culture being the primary one. I don't think any of that changes today. Maybe how we talk about it kind of has evolved, but yeah, that's the soup or the
That is
stew,
the soup.
or whichever you prefer.
I do think it would be fun to unpack some of what the concepts are, because I mean, I have so many questions I just want to ask about kind of the tactics of it, and then kind of overlaying what the last 5 years of lay of the land have been like, and how I've kind of interpreted that playbook, if you will. But maybe just frame what some of those ingredients are. Like when you think about founders, corporations, institutions, community organizations, like who are all the players? How do they generally operate? When it's working really well, what does it look like? When it's not working so well, where do you typically see it kind of struggling? Where's the friction?
Yeah. Well, that'll occupy our first 2 hours, just answering that question. Let me start simple, and then we can kind of pick at things as we go forward. So one of the first things that I determined, being a former founder multiple times, was this: I need to go talk to founders.
Yep.
And the first thing that people want to do, because in most places, it's not the founder or founders that are hiring you, right? It's economic development folks, government folks, whatever. That's usually the case. And the first thing they want you to do is talk to all the stakeholders. And I'm like, not so quickly. And every place I've done this with, not including those probably 16 to 18 places that I've done at least a multi-month deep dive and audit, some of them then turned into longer term consulting. But the most common thing is like I think Ian came up with this, is like 100 founders in 100 days, right? And by the way, it was actually probably more like 75 to 100 founders in like 3 weeks is what we tried to do.
Right.
So you could just by that statement, you're going to understand that our approach is a little not or atypical, right? Most consultants would come in and talk to all the stakeholders first. In fact, I see, the big consulting companies sometimes dabble in this, and they'll be like, 2/3 will be stakeholders and 1/3 will be entrepreneurs. And that's only at the end after they've already figured out what they need to figure out. So I was like, the heck with that. Like, I'm going to go right to the source. What's really interesting is that sets you up for the next discussions going forward, right? Like what should
Yep.
we do or what's happening? Some of the other themes in that were like talent. Cleveland has plenty of good enough talent to start with. Universities, population size. You have capital, which I always try to save for last. You have the institutions that you just referenced, government, universities, and government isn't just government. It's county government, city government, maybe any kind of regional organizations like Jumpstart, right? You have even feds getting in and out in some places. So you have that kind of dynamic. And then, so institution, density. That was the
Dense.
thing that was, I think, kind of stood out as not working in Cleveland. Met some really great people, but there was a group on the east side. There was a group
Yeah.
downtown. There was a group kind of slightly west side, right? And they knew each other and kind of were courteous and said hi to each other, but they weren't working to create some density. And density can be a funky thing. It's the only thing that can be engineered, but it can also easily be engineered wrong. So those are those 5 themes that we had stumbled upon that we thought represented all the important drivers of the startup community. I'll pause there because I know you said your question could do 2 hours, but I'll let you
Yes,
hear
yes.
the next phase.
Well, density certainly resonates also because that was my diagnosis as I came to Cleveland, and you realize quickly someone on the full east side versus the full west side are actually like 45 minutes driving from each other.
Right.
And so the like pockets where you might have natural collisions, they just don't happen as much.
Certainly not to the
And
level that a large populated place should have or expect. Yeah.
to me, one of the real salient takeaways I remember from your talk was really around the importance of storytelling. And to me, I saw at that point this density problem, and I saw this storytelling problem, and I felt it was so strange because all the folks that I had gotten to know in Cleveland were these incredibly inspirational, aspirational people. They have built companies that had they been in New York or San Francisco, I was pretty sure like everyone would know who they are. They would have had the venture funding that they need. And I came to an opinion, my like diagnosis of the situation was it sort of lives on the flip side of the Midwestern kindness and warmth is a certain humility and modesty, which I also love and appreciate about everyone here, but it never lends itself particularly well to talking about like the things that are going well, and success and excellence and like quality at that level. And so we never talk about it. And
No.
so because we don't talk about it, no one knows about it.
Right. And because no one knows about it, many people don't believe it can actually happen here, which means that no one ever gets started, right?
Yes.
There's no collective regional confidence, right? That you could take an idea to something special.
And that really was the core thesis of Lay of the Land, was like, what if we just tried to amplify some of those stories?
Yeah. And here's what I try to tell people. The stories don't have to be about massive multi-million or billion-dollar exits. The stories can be smaller. They can be parts of the journey along the way. They can be, hey, I just reached my 100th customer, or I just hired my 100th person, or we just landed a big distribution deal, right? All those little stories add up to a big collective story that says, man, there's shit going on here. Like, if they can do it, I can do it, right? So the stories can be small, but just as impactful.
Yeah. And I think I found that to be the truth. And that really does compound over time as people begin to understand that they're not like alone in that journey and that you can celebrate those small things along the way.
Yeah. The best ecosystems do celebrate all the things, not just the most obvious one.
Yeah. Lay of the Land is brought to you and is proudly sponsored by Roundstone Insurance. Headquartered in Rocky River, Ohio, Roundstone shares Lay of the Land's same passion for bold ideas and lasting impact from our community's entrepreneurs, innovators, and leaders. Since 2005, Roundstone has pioneered a self-funded captive health insurance model that delivers robust savings for small and medium-sized businesses. They are part of the solution to rising healthcare costs, helping employers offer affordable, high-quality care while driving job creation and economic growth throughout Northeast Ohio. Like many of the voices featured on Lay of the Land, including Roundstone's founder and CEO Mike Schroeder, Roundstone believes entrepreneurship, innovation, and community to be the cornerstones of progress. To learn more about how Roundstone is transforming employee health benefits by empowering employers to save thousands in per employee per year healthcare costs, please visit roundstoneinsurance.com. Roundstone Insurance, built for entrepreneurs, backed by innovation, committed to Cleveland. So, how do you make an ecosystem better?
Well, that's going to be the second set of 3 hours that we'll spend time on.
Like how does it actually work?
How does it work? I mean, I don't know. It's a complex system, and where the complexity is that there's lots of variables, ingredients, whatever you want to kind of say, and they seem to work different at different times and different places. It's why there's not a playbook. As Brad always reminded me during this 5 pilots we did in 2017, is like, be careful that we start to sound like we know what we're doing, because we don't really know what we're doing. And so it's why I've used terms like mindset or framework as opposed to recipe or playbook, which, by the way, was an evolution for us in 2017, is in terms of language. So I today, here we are, 8 years later, I use the word mindset, which it gets to approach. And mindset also tells you that it's individual and human, not a machine, right? Because machines don't have mindsets, at least not quite yet. We're getting there. So how does it work? Like doing all the good things in a good way over a period of time.
Right.
Now, there's a lot
and one thing, like measured in years.
Yeah, measured in definitely years. Now, by the way, I can tell you things that could probably have an impact in 3 months, but they're just one small piece of the whole, right? So in complex systems, there's a lot of, you're building the right environment, not the right machine. In complex systems, you're creating room for serendipity, for two people to collide and decide to start a company or set up a new activity that supports the ecosystem, right? And it's very difficult, if not impossible, to consistently engineer those things over time. Back to mindset. The mindset has to be, I can't control an outcome. I'll give you one example specific to Cleveland. How's that blockchain conference working out for you?
Fair point.
And I say that, and with no disrespect to the people who spent a lot of time and effort and money putting that together. And I was in the room a few times in the beginning and tried to warn people across. That idea was that if we do this one thing really, really well, that will kind of put us on the map and that will fix everything. And I doubt that it fixed anything. Maybe gave you a little bit of awareness, a little bit of spotlight for a while. But I got to tell you, there's probably 15 other blockchain conferences that are all thinking the same thing just in the United States. So there's that kind of silver bullet strategy that never, here's what I'll tell you what won't work is putting all your eggs in one activity. I use that in the broadest definition possible, like a conference or a venture fund or even a space. And only doing one of those things is not enough.
Well, I want to use that to introduce the idea of playing to strengths, because that's really the remedy and kind of the alternative that I always felt like. What does Cleveland have an authentic right to win if you were to actually think about all the sets of things that it could compete in? It was probably not blockchain, but it credibly could be a whole variety of other things.
By the way, it could have been blockchain if they'd also done all the things around it, right? But to say this road will lead us to prosperity. Again, I just picked 3 of them, right? A big venture fund, a big conference, or maybe a big building. Those are typically my favorite blog post I wrote is sometimes a $20 pizza beats a $20 million building, right? Because a building's like, I don't have any affinity to a building, but I could meet really cool people that are going through the same journey as I am over a $20 pizza or multiple thereof. So to answer your question, I can't, decent sized population, good set of a variety of colleges and universities, hardworking, good kind of Midwest / East Coast kind of motivations and work ethic, certainly known for healthcare, right? Certainly those things are kind of almost like table stakes. They're almost like the ante into the poker game. They're not enough in themselves, right?
Yeah.
You take a place like Fort Wayne, Indiana, or even Columbia, South Carolina. Columbia, South Carolina, state capital, big university, still only 400,000 people in the whole metro area, probably 200,000 downtown. I mean, compared to Cleveland, that's a neighborhood, right? Anyway, so yeah, there's a baseline of stuff. You still got to do all the hard work from that. Still got to play poker, I guess, if I'm going to complete my analogy.
Right. You still gotta play.
Still got to play the hands.
I would be remiss to not ask what are some of the 3-month low hanging fruit things that a community should do?
Yeah, and I think there's always a little bit of this going on, but I was trying to encourage them in the places that after the 3-month audit, if you will, and the readout,
Yeah.
after that first year, we learned that, they actually don't need to be told what could be happening. They actually need help doing it. So we extended our kind of practice to being more like a 1 to 3 year kind of practice. And in some places like Buffalo, we actually hired someone, embedded them as a full-time Techstars employee, to actually try to go implement the advice that we had given. So given that that doesn't exist today, let me tell you, the first tool out of the toolbox is to get founders together consistently. And I mean, probably weekly, at most every 2 weeks. It could start small, 10, 15, 20 people. Hopefully, if it does the right thing, tries to keep out most, if not all, the vendors, right? All
Right.
the people that want to sell them something, all the economic development folks who are supposed to love them, but really don't know how. But just getting the founders together so they feel like you're building your tribe, right? This is a little bit of kind of language geekiness, but one of the insights that we learned over a couple of years is that you have to have a strong community before you can have a strong ecosystem. And people say, well, aren't those the same words? And I said, yeah, even I still use them interchangeably sometimes. But the notion is that the community is really the founders and maybe a few like full-time investors. And there's people who are 100% dedicated to the task of running their company. The ecosystem also includes economic development folks, bloggers, podcasters, right? Everyone else in the community. But if you don't have a strong community, you don't have a strong ecosystem. And so it was almost like, I think Brad or Ian talked about, they're like Russian nesting dolls. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so back to the point, you got to get the community strong, which means founders. And the founders are at the center of that whole thing. And it's almost building more power and control with the elevating founders to leading positions, having them figure out how to put a conference, whether it's once a month or once a year. Like, how do we kind of showcase and highlight what we're doing as founders? I think that's the core. And by the way, you're never done that. Like, that might splinter, and maybe there's a women in tech thread, and maybe there's maybe a sector tech, right? A healthcare tech only. And that's fine. But I'll give you an example. Here in Raleigh,
Yeah.
Durham, one of the longest standing entrepreneurial support organizations in the country, CED, called the Council for Entrepreneurial Development, has been around, I believe, more than 40 years. If not the first, certainly the longest standing. Great people. Some of them are really good friends of mine. But in an organization that's been around 40 years, you kind of start to feel like, you're the Mac Daddy, right? And there's a little bit of
Yeah.
jumpstart in that. Like, it can't help but be. Jumpstart's done amazing things. But there's many people there who think like, well, Jumpstart's the Mac Daddy. They're not. The founders are the Mac Daddy. I'm really overusing this word. It feels like it's from like a Chris Farley movie or something. I don't know. But you know what I mean? Like, that may seem subtle to some people, but how do we kind of really focus everyone's attention on the founder? I'll finish with this thought. One of the things that when I started doing at my readouts, I don't know if I did it in Cleveland, is I say, all right, everyone who's a founder, stand up. If I don't do it that way, I say, everyone who's a founder, I want you to stand up and go to this side of the room. And everyone else stand up and go to this side of the room. And so I just say really simply, to that side of the room, the non-founders, your job is one job. How do I support them to make them grow bigger, faster, better? And this side of the room, founders, how do you interact and show up vulnerable and seeking new information to help you go faster, better, stronger? That's it. So What do?
That's it.
Make sure you elevate founders and have those activities to support them and make them easy and frictionless to get. That was really long, by the way. Sorry.
No, it's great. I layer deeper than that because this is something I've also thought a lot about over the years now is I've tried to quantify it as much as I can, but it's sort of a hard exercise. But the facilitation, I want to talk really about kind of the give first mentality, which you kind of gave me the language for, but also like how to actually facilitate meaningful connections. Because one thing that I took from the whole philosophy, if you will, was it's really important to introduce people to each other.
Yeah.
That should know each other.
Yeah.
That maybe don't know each other.
Yeah.
And so over the years now, I think it's been probably close to 2,000 introductions of value, which is another phrase that I've come across. And I'm really proud of that. I know it's been material in some way, really hard to quantify like what downstream comes from that. But I would love to hear how you think about like how you approach that, what it means to actually facilitate meaningful connections. And
yeah, well, the key word is trust, and it shows up in a couple different ways. First of all, I'm a very active connector of people. I'm just talking about just me connecting with people and wanting to. I hold open office hours. I have for 12 to 15 years. They're at this stage 3 to 5 a week. You know, it's a calendar block. There's a Calendly or a Google appointment. You know, anybody can go to my website at heivly.com and sign up, and I'll meet with anybody. There's no curation, no filtering, and you never know what you're going to get, right? So that starts my trust. I trust that the people coming in are going to be interesting to me. I also assume, and it happens more and more, that I'm going to get something out of it as much as they do. So it's not a one-way kind of transaction. And so that's how I kind of view like that connecting and getting connected to people is really important. And in fact, it's a superpower or it's my gold, right? My network is my gold because I know how to use it and support it. So I always talk about just you should be making new connections every day, every week, right? Figure out how to do it. You can, try to engineer it a little bit if you want to, but just be open that some of them are going to be turds and some of them are going to be awesome.
yeah,
And if I try to engineer for awesome, I'm going to miss people that maybe, look like I shouldn't use the word turd, but you know what I mean? That don't look
yeah,
like it'd be valuable. And they surprise me with the amount, of connection we create. And then the second thing, Jeff, is really about the meaningful part, making those connections meaningful. And in fact, I've even blogged like, here's like a script that you could follow during your networking meetings. And what I say is that at some point near the end, you need to look that other person in the eye and say, what can I do for you? Now, if you've spent the appropriate amount of time, not just talking about what you need or want, but understanding what's driving them, that question becomes pretty simple. What can I do to help you? And a lot of people go, and you can't let up. You go, no, tell me you're trying to hire someone, you're trying to do this. You never know what I could do to help you in some ways. So once you get someone to give you their answer, then it's acting on it. Okay. So how do you build trust? Well, I said I was going to do this, and now within 24 to 48 hours, I'm doing this. I'm making an introduction to someone, connecting you to my neighbor who's looking for a sales job, and you're looking for a
yep.
salesperson, right? I'm thinking about writing a business book, and I'd love to talk to someone who's written one before, so I can figure out what the challenges are, whatever it is, right? Like you never, oh, by the way, my sister is an editor in New York or whatever, right? So again, everyone has their own like gold. How do you share it and make that to me, that's how you get to meaningfulness. And part of that is trusting that the other person will act in good faith like you do. So if you do it, I assume they're going to do it. And if they don't, then nothing lost. I just, they didn't do it. Move on. It's not a mark on your reputation or any of that kind of crap. I just hate that kind of feeling. So I trust my network. I trust the people in my network. I trust when I don't believe in double opt-in introductions unless it's really someone very super important that I want to make sure I don't overuse that thing. But for 98% of the people, I will make an introduction to you somewhere along the line, not because you asked or they asked, just because I think you both are in Cleveland. You should know each other, right? Could
Right.
be as simple as that. And I trust that you two will make something of it if there's something there to be made. Another long-winded answer.
No, it's awesome.
Let me jump in. I think the key word is meaningful, and
Yeah.
meaningful is a journey. It's not a transaction, right? Meaningful builds over time. You and I've met today really in a bigger way than email. I have no idea if a month, 6 months, 2 years from now, there'll be a reason for us to connect. But if we've treated each other well with respect and we are and curious about what each other are doing, and that inevitably there's probably going to be something that will connect us again. And then we just continue to build on that. And some of those happen the next day and some of them happens the next month. I love that. Like that is
Yeah.
so cool, right?
No,
Yeah.
I love that too. Sometimes it's like years
Yeah.
after.
And you don't know, by the way, this is all the essence of give first, right? I'm
Right.
happy to give first. I don't know how it's going to come back. I don't know who it's going to come from, but I know I put enough of this goodwill out. I'm going to get a healthy amount back.
How would you denote give first? What does that mean to you in your words?
Yeah. Brad does a much better job. And in fact, he just last year released a whole book on this called Good First. But for me, it's certainly goodwill. It's just taking a meeting when I don't know why. It's being asked to do a podcast when I've only met the person via email. It's just saying, and I didn't ask whether you have 5 listeners or 500,000. It didn't matter. It wouldn't have mattered to me. I know by doing this at some point, something will happen. You and I will do something. Someone in Cleveland will listen to this, call me up, say, how can I help? I'm like, well, I'm writing my first novel. Oh, well, my brother's the president of Random House. You know what I mean? Like, I just don't know where it's going to come.
Are you writing a novel?
I am.
Cool.
I just finished the first draft. Make sure we put a pin in that. I don't want to talk, by the way, I've been scared. I put it off for a year and a half and was a total wimp. So I finally started it kind of November, December, 435 pages later. By the way, and about a founder and a venture capitalist.
Oh, cool.
It's a really deep. All right, I'll finish here. Someone told me years ago, you can tell more truth in fiction than nonfiction. I can write about how to be a founder. I can blog about it all you want. But sometimes when you put it in story form and with deep characters, like my parents aren't around anymore, but I wished they could read this book because they would have understood what I went through because they could never understand what it was like to be a founder, right? Back to meaningfulness. I'll tell you a story. So it's probably about a year and a half ago. Someone jumped on my open office hours, 20 minutes. This woman gets on and she said, so I talked to you 3 years ago. I was coming out of the military, wasn't sure where I was going to live with my husband and kids. I think they live in Denver now. And I just want to tell you, you gave me some advice that really gave me a North Star. I now have 2 different startups, one kind of a servicey one a product one. They're going fantastic. And I'm just here to say thank you. If that doesn't give you the feels, right?
Yeah.
So people say, why do you do it? I want more of those.
Yeah. That's amazing.
Yeah. Yeah. She's now becoming a certified Lego instructor that Lego is a tool used by a lot of people to do design thinking stuff. And she's doing that because 2 of her 3 children are autistic on the spectrum and Legos calms them down.
Mm.
So she wants to teach that to other kids. And you're like, God, I could be part of that. Freaking sign me up every day.
Yeah, that's quite motivating.
Thank you.
What today sticks with you as the biggest learnings from that whole exercise of trying to understand communities and all that work that you did?
This is going to sound like a moment, but human systems are so complex and so touchy. And so, we all show up. We're all who we are at any one moment because of all the things that have happened in our past and what we're trying to be in the future. And all that shit shows up in a startup ecosystem. And think one of the things when we were corresponding back and forth in email, one of the things I was thinking about, what's the thing I've learned? It's that, humans are still going to be humans. and
Right.
which means like sometimes it's beautiful and sometimes it's a pain in the ass. And you have to, I focused on the founders, elevating them, but I also now understand that the stakeholders, I didn't say they didn't have a role. I was just trying to kind of even out their roles a little bit by elevating the founders. But darn, those stakeholders are tough some days, right?
Mm.
And they're not wired the way we need them to wired. I used to say about 50% of the stakeholders I would sit and talk to, I could kind of bring them over to kind of our side of thinking, but that means 50% that I didn't. And so those 50%, if they control funds or buildings or programs, that hasn't changed. And
Yeah.
maybe it's could have, should have spent more time. And I'm still thinking about, I still do like a lot of keynote stuff. How do I get through to them to get them to have a different mindset? Bring it all back
Right.
to mindset.
No, I like your phrase of they love entrepreneurs, but they don't really know how to.
Yeah. And they're bringing all the experiences slash baggage from what made them successful. And it turns out that most of those muscles actually, not only do they not work in ecosystem development, but they're actually a negative force. So if I was younger, I'd spend more time figuring that out and probably going on the road and trying to fix some of those people.
Do you think it's like a systems level incentive problem, or is it just institutional and people?
Yes and yes. I mean, just every human is driven by different motivations and factors. So it's really understanding that money, respect, whatever, control. Some of it is the institutions create that environment by the way they're structured. And so when you're successful in it, why wouldn't you stop doing what you're doing? And then obviously one way to change behavior is by changing the incentives. But in many large corporations and, government organizations, universities, they're just never going to change the incentives because that's how that system works. It's a problem, or let's say it's a challenge.
Is there something in that same reflection that you've changed your mind about, that you used to believe about all of this, that doesn't feel grounded in reality anymore?
That's a fantastic question, and I should have been more prepared for that, being that we were talking about Cleveland 8 years later. Here's a thing that I have from a purely personal Chris Heivly point of view, spending a number of weeks over 3 months in Cleveland, spending every couple, whatever, weeks, months in time in Buffalo over almost a 2-year period, spending 3 years, not every day, obviously, or even every week in Columbia, South Carolina. Uh, I got my own ego, right? I think the good news is I've spent probably more time thinking about ecosystems than, other than maybe a handful of people in this world. And I've been to 100 cities, either speaking or diving down deep and doing the audits. And even with all that and my ego that says, I can help founders. I can help this place. There's only so much an outsider can do. It's really up to the people that live and breathe every minute and every molecule of oxygen in that community. They really have to make the long-term change. And I can tweak it and I can poke at it and I can give them some ideas. I can tell them, well, I probably do more of A than B. I can do all those things, but there's only so much one individual can do to kind of lift, right? And maybe years ago, I thought I could make bigger changes faster, but it turns out not so much, Hively.
How do you think about mentorship when we're talking about meaningful relationships?
Yeah. Well, I don't think you get the optimum, or you can't optimize mentorship without having meaningful relationships. Mentorship is a two-way thing. It's not a one-way. One of the cities, I don't remember, they all kind of blur together. I remember probably a early 60s-year-old man who had built two different businesses and had successful exits. And and I remember giving a mentorship kind of workshop for all the mentors in this city and giving me an idea about how to make their mentorship most effective. Now, by the way, they were associated with a program that assigned a mentor to a founder, which I abhor, right? I understand why they're trying to systematize and kind of engineer things. I get it, but I don't think. And then he asked the question, well, Chris, what if I know that what they're doing is wrong. And I just kept saying, it's not your company. But Chris, what if it's not your company? You don't get to decide. And so you got to show it with, and my wife gets so tired of hearing it because sometimes I leave this door open and she could hear me doing the mentor thing. One of my most common refrains is like, listen, this is one person's advice. It may work for you. It may not work for you. But at the end of the day, I'm going to sleep the same tonight, whether you use my advice or not. Right. Like, I'm not going to attribute my reputation or ego or, respect for myself based on how you take my mentorship. I'm just one person. By the way, if there was a playbook to run, we wouldn't be sitting here talking, right? We would just be running the damn playbook. There's no right answers, right? There's
Yeah.
probably more right things than wrong things to do at certain moments. So back to your point about mentorship, I believe it's built on a two-way relationship where you're almost two peers, just with different sets of experiences, and you're sharing those. By the way, it's part and parcel of the whole book I'm writing is how the new founder takes advice or doesn't, right? And who he takes advice from. So when it's really done well, it's just like two people sitting down and kind of know each other at a level that's pretty deep. By the way, mentorship only really works at that level if you don't show up vulnerable. I think I wrote a post this week that's like, you can't get good mentorship if you don't ask for help. How many founders never ask for help? They may tell you what they're doing, but they're like, can you help me? What would you do? Right. So that's a little bit of vulnerability. I could go on another hour on that one.
Yeah. Well, there's definitely a lot there because it's clearly an important part, but it is hard to facilitate, I think.
Yeah. So let me come around to something we've already talked to. I think mentorship in a perfect world is not organized or part of a program. It's just that there's a community who is super connected, which is super frictionless, where people make introductions all the time, where back to the Kevin Bacon thing, we're only ever two people away from anybody in our community, right?
Yeah.
Like, think of an environment like that. And mentorship is more ad hoc. It's you and I go to have a coffee. Turns out we both love hockey and reading books and, you know, numerology about the number 3. I'm just making stuff up. We bond on something that doesn't even have to be about the very thing we're doing, but there's something there, and then we get to say, "Hey, let's chat again in a couple weeks," right? And sometimes it's about the weather, and sometimes it's about the company, and sometimes it's not even about a challenge that I need, very transactional. Sometimes it's just kind of meta thinking, right? But those relationships can evolve over time and become very, very interesting. I still have a mentor and we are friends. I go visit him in Arizona. He's 10 years older than me. And every time we sit down, he goes like, all right, tell me what it's like to write a book. Cause he's never written a book. Right.
Yeah.
Tell me what it's like, how you're using those images in your blogs. Like they're AI, right? Yeah. How does that work? Well, let me show you. So there's an example of it. I'm still learning from him and getting some probably more emotional advice at this point, and I'm sharing with him functional advice, right, about how to do
Yeah.
things. That's a great mentee relationship, but all built on connection, right?
Right.
So the more
Right.
connected a place is, the more chances you have of finding 2 or 3 or 5 of those people that you can call up and say, I want to run something by you. You got time?
Right. It's a signal that there's a good foundation in place.
Yeah. Which, by the way, gets back to like foundations are norms and culture, and that it's okay to reach out to someone or have someone introduce you and say you should go grab a coffee. Like that has to be the foundation because all those things like mentorship and they all kind of spring forward on top of that, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
No, it's why it's upstream. It makes total sense. Why do you put capital at the end?
Yeah. Well, you know, capital to me by definition is a risk management game. And so typically, from 100,000 feet, it's a lagging indicator of what's happening. It's not it's been proven with tons of research that more capital in an area does not create more or better outcomes. Now, that doesn't mean capital doesn't play a very strong role. It's just not the only thing. And yet most, complicated thinkers, government, are all used to thinking that money buys outcomes. And in entrepreneurship, it doesn't, right? I mean, if it did, I can tell you there's hundreds of cities around the world that have thrown a ton of money at entrepreneurship, and yet we still only have one Silicon Valley, right? We may have a strong London, Berlin, New York, maybe even LA is done, is a top tier, but money has not been the driver. Obviously, more money helps build bigger companies, but it's not. The problem isn't that it's last. I put it last so it became not first. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
So
it does make
it's
sense.
important, but not the only game in town. Back to capital, big buildings, and God, what was the third thing we talked about earlier? That are, anyway, remember.
Pizzas?
Pizzas, yeah. Pizza beats all those things.
So to kind of revisit something we were talking about before we were recording, this pessimism, optimism, framing of the situation. We could talk about Cleveland, but also, have you seen cities get better?
Yes.
Or was it like more academic? So that's good.
No, I've seen cities get better. When I arrived in Columbia, South Carolina, there was no co-working. Well, there's a small co-working space, but also had architects and, all these different people just needing a co-working space. Over time, we created a new co-working space just for founders. They've started a small fund. It's got more and more awareness, even up to the governor level. They've taken a couple big swings at things like quantum. And, our first coffee meetup that I started, I think 6 or 8 people showed up, and now it's probably 60 to 80, right? So that's progress. Now, in the full arc of where we want that to be, Brad's 15 to 20 year kind of arc, they may think that there's still only 2 steps, but man, those steps are really super hard to do, right? So to me, that's progress. There was another question in there, but I can't remember where I was.
Well, about Cleveland and your...
About pessimism, right? So yeah, I mean, I think there's always more room for more, and there's always things we could do to be tighter connected. There's not a city I don't go into that there's not what I would call a bad actor, someone who's operating selfishly, who wants to control things. These are all aspects that don't make for good ecosystems, right? And some of them are important people and some of them are not. Frankly, they're all a pain in the butt to me, and I never met one that I didn't think I could convert to a good person. However, that being said, one of the best ways that you can move around that is to focus on the founders and to tell their stories. And I don't care whether you're talking about 8 people or 16 people or 64 people. And a phrase that I either stole or borrowed is that confidence is contagious. And so that's where the storytelling. So you know what? Even if you have some bad actors, even if don't have enough money to run the event you want, you know what? Find a back bar on a 4:30 on a Wednesday or a Thursday. Everyone buys their own beer, so it's no cost to anybody. And, organize a bunch of people and share each other's stories, and then go podcast and blog and then one-on-one tell people about, hey, did you hear that Dan just, did this and this? That doesn't really cost anything, right? But that has a material effect, and that can have you could see that effect in the course of months, right?
Yeah.
Do that weekly, make it consistent, ask everyone to bring someone new, throw up a little Facebook group or put a little web page together. Don't name it anything. Startup Cleveland, Founders for Cleveland. Just start getting people together, coffee, beer, lunch, whatever, and get it started. Or take what you have and enhance it and tell the stories over and over again. And that'll turn a native pessimism into at least some quiet optimism. Because there's always that one founder who's sitting there thinking, I might want to do this, who somehow either finds or gets dragged into this and then says, this is my community. I want to be a part of this. If they can do it, I can do it. I'm going to go do this. I'm going to make the leap.
Yeah, I would really struggle to understand how you would come out the other side of this exercise more pessimistic about things.
It would be a pretty warped head.
Yeah, it's been a lot of fun.
Excellent.
So what are you most excited about now? Like, what do you find yourself drawn to? Obviously, you still write and you have the blog. So these are topics you're still thinking about all the time.
Yeah, I still write, podcast, and speak about this. So,
Yeah.
probably 7 to 10 kind of keynote kind of things, mostly in the US today. I really don't like travel as much as I used to. I'm not a young buck anymore. I still talk to people in cities big and small about what's happening. Obviously, a lot of that's inbound, which is even cooler. So I get to say like what's happening and learn from them. Certainly, the application of AI into our lives is going to affect entrepreneurship, which in effect
Yeah.
is going to change the ecosystem. In fact, I just spoke this week at a conference here in North Carolina called All Things AI, and there's 2,000 people. And what I was asked to talk about in my keynote was the intersection of startups and AI, right? In front of a bunch of AI people. Frankly, I was a little afraid because I don't know AI to the level they do. No Claude code in this head yet,
Yeah.
but it's like a lot of things. The same issues are the same. And so we still have a lot of work to do on those same issues. And a lot of times it's kind of old men who are in the power positions. So who better to help change your mind than another old man? So I'm happy to do so. It's 2 to 6 hours of effort, depending on whether I have to travel or not. So yeah, speaking, writing, a podcast I'm doing with Techstars, which we kind of did a soft launch on. I think we're up to 13 episodes every other week. I'm really enjoying that because I get to go into a little bit more detail than I can in a blog.
Yeah.
Yet it's still only 14 to 16 minutes. So it's an easy car drive or dog walk or whatever. So that's fun. And I've already kind of created like 100 topics. So I'm good to go.
Yeah, I bet.
I just got to sit and kind of think about them and record them.
Yeah. One of the things I've thought about recently, I mean, as it's sort of impossible to not think about AI, is like what AI will not have as much of a profound effect on. And I think it's largely this stuff. It's the community aspect of entrepreneurship.
Well, here's exactly what I said. I
Yeah.
said, maybe to paraphrase, there's still a process to entrepreneurship. Find an idea, work on that idea, take it to some people, see what they think the idea, find out half of it sucks, work on the other half, build out an MVP, test that, engage with that. Like AI can help you in any one of those segments, probably do it a little faster. But what it can't do is understand the difference between a potential customer saying, I would pay for that tomorrow. And that sounds kind of interesting, right? And actually
Yeah.
maybe AI can help you with that. But in those responses are pauses and looks on their faces. So there's a human element that goes all the way through the process of starting a company and building a company and launching it. That's not going to go away.
Yeah. The meaningful connection part, the trust part, the human part.
Exactly. And there's
It
no
can't.
amount of AI that's going to help you fix that. Now, certain elements can go faster. Maybe if you do 75 interviews and you loaded them all up, you could get probably better insights and better managing instead of using kind of your brain. I probably you can do that better and faster, but you still have to figure out what to do next, right?
Yeah.
That's still human based. And then, by the way, let's just think about, I say most mentorship, bringing this full circle, is less about functional things and more about our mental state. And so I still think the best mentorship is human, not a machine telling me what to do or how I should think. So none of that's going to change. And because of that, the community that surrounds that has to focus on the human element, which is, I think, everything I've just talked about in the last hour, right?
Yeah.
So
No, for sure.
that's my thinking as of, let me see, March 26th, 27th, 2026. Maybe changes in 2 months.
It seems to change pretty fast these days.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely want to ask about the book, but I want to greenfield, is there something particularly important about these sets of topics that we haven't really talked about?
Well, I think for anybody who's kind of new to this stuff or interested in Cleveland or elsewhere, I think what I tried to do and all my work has tried to do is lay out kind of the building blocks of how this improves your city and its city's economy, how to become more of an innovative city with a better ecosystem and a community, right? So you got community and ecosystem, and then you're like your city's economy, right? In this kind of Russian nesting doll that
Yeah.
Ian laid out so well in their book. And so, I think net is there's a role for everyone in this, but I'd like you ought to have the right mindset when you go into that. And so I think we covered a whole bunch of those things. So that feels good and important and appropriate. On any one of those things, as we joked about, we could go an hour, 2 hours deeper. Those are kind of my reflections. And I don't think those challenges are going away like tomorrow because they're mostly human challenges and mindset.
Yeah. That's the part AI won't automate.
No, and the part that's the hardest to figure out.
Yeah. So where did this book come from within you?
Well, I mean, it shouldn't be too much of a surprise that, so there was two motivations. One is I started thinking about a story and would it be cool to write a novel? And for a year and a half, I'm like, it'd be cool, but you can't do it. You don't know how to do this. This is a typical startup founders, dialogue in their head. And, so I wimped about it for a good part of a couple years, and I kept saying to my wife, someday I'm gonna do this. And I kind of had some rough parts about the story. And I knew my motivation was I wanted to follow like a founder. In this case, it's through about 18 months of an arc of their company and the different people that come in. Cause we know these people, like there's good VCs and there's bad VCs, right? There's like
Yep.
good consultants and good friends, and there's bad consultants and friends and family, right? Why would you ever do this? That's crazy. Just keep working for IBM. Everything will be fine, right? You'll have a great life.
Yep.
Girlfriends or spouses or, you know, significant others who don't understand the ups and downs. And so I'm like, I'd love to tell that story. And then I started thinking about characters, which was the most fun, especially the first investor in this company and I modeled him over my mentor in Arizona and a TV character that I kind of smushed together.
Yeah.
Kind of sounds like fun, right? And so, and Jeff, what I'll tell you is that it was kind of late November, early December last year that I was somehow on YouTube, and I stumbled on a interview with John Grisham. Okay, noted author, former lawyer, little small town lawyer, and they walk through like I'm not a writer, I was a lawyer, small town lawyer, barely good at it. And then he jumped ahead later and said, January 1st of every year, I start a book. I've done this for 20 years.
Mm.
Every book I've written, I start on January 1st. And I wrote right through kind of May, June, and then I hand it over. Now I have people I hand it over to. And I also at the same time was reading a Stephen King book, which is like 20 years old. And it's about his writing process.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Okay. Very cool book. And basically what both of them said is stop being a wimp, get off your butt or get on your butt and just start writing. And so a week later, I'm like, I'm going to start writing. Now I've used AI to a certain level. A very good friend of mine, well known in our industry, is also considering or starting. He hasn't told me yet, but we were considering like how to do this. And he said, the right AI companion is like your best friend sitting in your room, always like ready to go that you can riff with.
Yeah.
And so I'm like, hey, I think this character should be like they're actually from Pittsburgh, right? Because that has that kind of like, how'd I grow up? Rust Belt, like I'm going to do a tech startup. How's this? But I was smart, so you can imagine as a character, it's got all those layers to it,
Oh,
right?
for sure.
But
Yeah.
like, I'm like, I think you should wear this. And then the AI would go like, well, how about this? And I'm like, oh, that's a great idea. And then I take that and I turn it up. So, I did that for about 3 weeks, which started giving me confidence. Confidence is contagious, right? So I
Yep.
started feeling like I can do this. And then I started arcing the novel because I knew, by the way, the other thing is John Grisham said, he says, I kind of know my first paragraph and I kind of know my last paragraph. And then I just have to fill in. John Irving, another author that I love, literally writes the last sentence of the book before he starts, right? So I'm like, I can do this. So here we are, about roughly 3 months to get a first draft, and now in editing mode, which is harder than writing. And I'm never really had to edit to this level. So it's a lot of reading and saying, God, that was kind of weak. Then you write a sentence and you're like, wait, did I use that sentence already? I can't remember, then I got to go back. And so anyway, that's the story. And by the way, the other character, the investor, is probably who I always wanted to be. right?
Mm.
Someone who really can get through to someone like a child or, a peer, and really help them in the moment they need it the most by saying the most perfect things and understanding at a really deep level what that person's going through.
That's awesome.
I'm not excited
Do
about it at all. Can you tell?
Yeah, yeah. Is there a name?
It's called The Offer,
The Offer.
and you got to
Cool.
figure out what that means.
Yeah. Nice. Well, that's awesome. Very cool.
Yeah, probably give it 6 months. I have an agent that I've used in my other books. When I'm done this first edit, send it to her. She'll start taking it up to New York and see if we can get someone to buy in. If not, I'll publish it myself. Don't really care.
I'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, we'll let you. You'll be on my my email list, I'm sure.
Cool. Well, I think we can work to bookend it here. I'll close with our traditional closing question, which for you is your favorite part of Cleveland.
My favorite part. So I thought about this a little bit, and there's probably two elements. One is walking around one night. It was a beautiful night, probably 70 degrees. And I stumbled on the Map Room, which is
Yeah.
a bar, right? Now, I don't know if you know, but I'm an old map guy, right? So kind of
Real cartographer.
yeah. So seeing a place called the Map Room and being able to walk in there and have a drink it's still a memory I think about, because it was also like probably had been cold and all of a sudden it went to like 70 and it was people were starting to like spring. I think people starting to get out in the streets. So that's kind of a little favorite memory. But the other thing was just meeting, 20, 30 real founders that, are working their ass off. And many of them I've still keep in touch with. I mean, that happens in every city I've been through, even if it might
Yeah.
be 3 or 4 years later. And I have to say, remind me, oh yeah, we met in Cleveland. I think there's a guy that just reached out recently. And so I get excited by other people's getting excited about their thing. And I'm like, how can I help? So
it's contagious.
So those are the two parts of Cleveland.
Cool. Well, Chris, I want to thank you. I'm grateful you took the time to have this conversation. It's fun to kind of do a meta episode on all of it.
I'm glad I could be part of your journey and part of this. Anxious to see if anybody gets excited about some of the things we talked about.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, because you didn't ask about the audience, I'll tell you, because it's cool, because it's been largely, like the whole movement itself, pretty founder led. So each person that's been on over the last 250 episodes kind of shares it to their network, and that's kind of organically how it's grown. So it's a few thousand local Northeast Ohio folks and my mom in New York. That's most of it.
Well, I love especially the last part. So this is one of the things I do, Ma. She can actually hear it and listen and touch it, right?
Oh, yeah. She'll all the way to the end. She'll listen.
That's awesome.
Cool. Well, if people had anything they wanted to follow up with you about, where would you point them?
Yeah, you can put it right in your show notes if you do that, or if you're listening. I give my email out easily, so it's chris@buildthefort.com. You can also go, if you want to meet one-on-one for 20 minutes, the easiest place is go to heivly.com/office hours, open office hours, something like that. You'll see it up in the top right, and we find a 20-minute session. And then I have the podcast and the blog. You can show up on my site, and the podcast is at Techstars. It's called Your Startup Community. So those are the places you could get my stuff and listen, and happy to chat with anybody about just about anything.
Yeah, I like the blog.
Thank you.
It's a staple of my information digest.
Well, I'll tell you, probably 400 blog posts in now, I'm getting more and more feedback in the last year. Sometimes I think it just takes you that long to build the audience, right?
Yeah.
But the feedback's really been kind of amazing over the last year. So
very cool. Well, thank you again, Chris.
It's my pleasure. Thanks for having me.
That's all for this week. Thank you for listening. We'd love to hear your thoughts on today's show. So if you have any feedback, please send over an email to jeffrey@layoftheland.fm, or find us on Twitter @podlayoftheland or @sternhefe, JEFE. If you or someone you know would make a good guest for our show, please reach out as well and let us know. And if you enjoy the podcast, please subscribe and leave a review on iTunes or on your preferred podcast player. Your support goes a long way to help us spread the word and continue to bring the Cleveland founders and builders we love having on the show. We'll be back here next week at the same time to map more of the land. The Lay of the Land podcast was developed in collaboration with the Up Company, LLC. At the time of this recording, unless otherwise indicated, we do not own equity or other financial interests in the company which appear on this show. All opinions expressed by podcast participants are solely their own and do not reflect the opinions of any entity which employs us. This podcast is for informational purposes only and should not be relied upon as a basis for investment decisions. Thank you for listening, and we'll talk to you next week.